Right. We'll continue. If you remember, the Rambam was talking about things that we are not allowed to destroy. Right. We have mitzvos of destroying Ovdei Kochavim gear, so to speak. Right. Asheras, mizbeachs, idols, stuff like that. We're not allowed to do it for ourselves, and therefore we can't destroy our gear. Right. Our mizbeach. And now, in number 8, where halacha ches in the 6th chapter of Hilchos Yesodei Hatorah, we're going to talk about destroying holy books. Very, very interesting topic that deserves a whole class in by itself, but leave it. We'll have to just learn it on the periphery. So the Rambam says, Kisvei HaKodesh, Kulan upeirushein ubeirehen asur l'sarfan. We can't destroy, we can't burn, we can't do anything to eradicate our what we called kisvei kodesh. Okay, Sfarim, Sefer Torah, and it applies to anything that has God's name in it. Okay. V'hama abdun beyad makanos o makas mardus. And if we do destroy it, okay, there's a lot of violations that you do. But the Rambam says, which is a little puzzling, because on the one hand, it's a doraisa, right? But on the other, because of lotasun ken lashem elokechem, as we said the last few days. But nevertheless, you only get what we call malchus mardus, okay, which is rabbinic malchus. So says the Rambam, Memedvar Mamorim, the Rambam qualifies this and says that's only B'Kisvei HaKodesh Shekasan Yisrael B'Kedusha. This is assuming that it was written by a upstanding Jewish person. Okay? Aval Apikores Yisrael Shekasav Sefer Torah Sofen Oso Imhaz Koros Shabo. Okay, so this is very, very eye-opening. The Rambam actually says that if a Apikores Jew wrote a Sefer Torah, it's one thing to say that it's puzzle, but the Rambam, this is, again, everything the Rambam gets, or 99% of the thing the Rambam gets, we all know come from the Gemara. So this is a Gemara in Meseches Gittin, Daf Mem Hey. Okay, this is where this Gemara comes from. There's a discussion about the differences between a Sefer Torah that was written by a Jew, who's an Apikores, versus a non-Jew. So when it comes to a Sefer Torah that was written by an Apikores, you have to burn it together with the names, right? The names of God. Remember how we said yesterday, how the name of God you have to cut out and you can't destroy. But when it comes, now, what is an Apikores? That's the second cheer by itself, right? We don't know exactly what an Apikores is, but we know from the Gemara in Sanhedrin at the end where it talked about people who don't have Olam Haba, and one of them is your Apikores. And there's many, many definitions. It's someone who basically doesn't believe in Torah min Hashemayim. If you were to get the common denominator between all the various opinions, that's what your Apikores is. So if he wrote it, it has to be burnt. Okay? Mipnei, and the Rambam explains, she'eno ma'amin b'kedushas Hashem. Okay? Because he doesn't believe in kedushas Hashem. V'lo kasvu lishmo. Remember how we need things done lishma? Right? If it's not lishma, it doesn't count, right? If you learn in Daf Yomi the last 3 months, you know that karbanos that have to be done lishma, and if not, they don't count. Well, some of them at least, right? So too the Sefer Torah, it has to be done lishma, and an Apikores. Yes, speaking of Apikores, Shmuel raises his hand. Yes.
Yeah, so what about if you get a Bible printed by some
Columbia Near East professor?
No, by some, like the Christian Bible, they often print with the Hebrew Bible. So would you
right?
say that he would say you should throw that out?
Wow, something to think about. I don't know. It's very problematic because we don't know, like you don't know sometimes who the true author is, right? That's another problem. So, and you don't really know, what a real Apikores is today anyway. Just because you're a professor in an Ivy League, right? Or whatever you want to define an Apikores, you know, someone on the more liberal side, right? That doesn't conform to halacha. I think it says in Sanhedrin, even someone who doesn't respect Talmidei Chachamim, right, is considered an Apikores. So yeah, there's a lot. You know, this is a whole topic by itself. But be that as it may, um, we got to go on. So what's the problem on Apikores? So the Rambam says, "Eno ma'amin b'kedushas Hashem v'lo kasvul lishma." Right? The problem was that it's not lishma. Ela shehu ma'ale b'daito shezeh kishar hadvarim. He says, "Okay, I'm writing a book. I'm writing a commentary on something, and right, this is what I think the pshat is, right? And then he just gets it wrong. Okay, he doesn't treat it with the kedusha that it is due. For whole the daito ken lo niskadesh Hashem. So therefore, and we see clear from here how much intent matters, right? There's a whole debate: how much does intent, right, matter? And well, like I just mentioned before, regarding karbanos, regarding everything, if you don't have the right intent, the right kavana, right, mitzvahs trichas kavana, kachim, right, sacrifices and karbanos, you need kavana, right? So too over here, if you have no kavana or anti-kavana, right? Either way, that is a very, very bad thing, and it ruins the entire book, right? It's like it's not recognizable because you don't know, right? So, like, how do you even know who wrote this Torah, right? That's also another problem. Like, you don't know, right, who the sofer was on a lot of these Torahs. So that's why this is a very, very, very problematic halacha. Like I said, this is quoted twice in Shas, in Shabbos, in Maseches Shabbos, where it talks about, if anyone remembers, there's a whole perek. It's called Kol Kisvei HaKodesh, on Daf Kuf Tezvav or so. It talks about if your house is burning on Shabbos, if your Svarim, if your shul is burning on Shabbos, what are you allowed to save? So it talks about you're not allowed to save a Sefer Torah on Shabbos. Not save. You can't. Yeah, you can't save a Sefer Torah on Shabbos if it was written by a non-Jew because it doesn't have the same kedusha. So you can't break Shabbos, right? That's why this Gemara. That's why this Rambam takes the halacha from Masechah Shabbos. Anyways, so there's really, a lot to talk about this one, but we'll just finish. Umitzvah l'sarfu k'dei shelo lahaniach shem la'apikorsim v'lo la'masehen. And the Rambam like doubles down over here, and he says the reason why it's so stringent is because we don't want to have it known that Apikorsim wrote this Torah or wrote this commentary or wrote this book or wrote whatever. We want to almost like eradicate their name, right? So that there'll be no remembrance of these apikorsim left. Aval ovid kochavim shekasav es Hashem gonzin oso. V'chen kitzvei hakodesh shabalu o shekasan ovdei kochavim yiganzu. This is very, very strange because we're treating non-Jews better than apikorsim. And if you think about it, it actually makes sense because a non-Jew is completely out of the parsha. He's not supposed to be writing a Torah. He's not Jewish. So therefore, if he wrote a Sefer Torah, we don't burn it. We actually do geniza, meaning you can't read from it either way, but at least you don't burn it. But an Apikores is a Jew who went bad. So therefore, we treat it worse. So this is really a mud nazach. very, very complicated. But anyways, oh, and the Rambam says at the end also shabalu, right? If it got worn out, right? How do you treat, right? This is also a whole discussion. How do you treat Sfarim that got worn out and they or Sefer Torahs that got worn out, right? We see this all the time. Sometimes they end up in museums, right? Sometimes they end up, but they're supposed to be, right? Not in museums. They're supposed to be in Geniza. Okay, if you can't read from them because they got all worn out, so they should also be in Geniza. So that is halacha ches. Okay, halacha tes. The Rambam ends off on a very, very interesting note. He talks about this term that we have, which is called azkaros, right? We said that word again, that if you have God's name, you have to treat it differently, right? You have to cut it out. So we say, okay, we all know what God's name is. But the Rambam actually, and the Rambam takes this almost verbatim from a Gemara we had a few months ago, if you remember, on Daf Lamed Hey Masechah Shavuos. Lamed Hey Amud Beis Masechah Shavuos, where the Gemara talks about when you're mashbia somebody, I say, I want you to swear to me in the name of God that you don't know testimony. Remember that? Where we talked about Shavuos Edus and Shavuos Hapikadon, swear to me that you don't have this, swear to me that you did do this. And when, in the good old days, when people actually took swearing seriously, right? So you would think twice before you swore falsely. So the question is, what if you say to someone, swear to me falsely on the pasuk that has God's name in it, but it's not so clear that the pasuk is referring to God? So where in the world does that happen? So the Rambam says, Kol shemos ha'amurim ba'avram kodesh. If you happen to pick a pasuk right in the beginning of Parshas Vayera, where it says, Adonai imna matzati chen be'inecha al na ta'avor me'al avdecha. Okay, this is a whole discussion within itself, as I like to say, because there's a very, very big debate who Avraham is referring to when he says, right? Because in the beginning of Vayera, you have the Malachim, and then Avraham says, "Hang on, God, I need to bring in the Malachim." So we don't know when Avraham says Adonai, if you found favor, right, in me, is he referring to the Malachim, or is he referring to, or is he referring to or is he referring to God himself? All right. So Hareze Kodesh. So the Rambam says this is Kodesh. This is absolutely God's name. Kol Hashemos Hamurim Belot Chol Chutz Mizeh. Okay, all the names that are written in the story of Lot, right? If you remember the story of Lot, where he's in Sodom with the angels trying to save the city, right? All the names of God are all Chol, are all not Kodesh, Chutz Mizeh, except for this one pasuk that says Al na Adonai Hinei na Matzah Avdecha Chen. Okay, that's when Lot basically thanks God at the end. So that is a reference to God. Kol Hashemas Ha'amurim Begivat Binyamin Kodesh. All the names of God are Kodesh at the story of at the end of Shoftim. Remember Shoftim Parak 20, Parak Chaf, where it talks about the story of Pelegish Begiva, where there was a civil war against the Shevet of Binyamin when they chopped up the woman, right? One of the more gruesome stories in Tanakh. But there's a discussion over there about what's going on with some of the words Adonai that appear over there. Kol Hashemos Hamurim b'Micha Chol. When the story of Pesel Micha also, all the words, all the time it says God's name. It's not referring to God. Kol Hashemos Hamurim b'Navos Kodesh. Right, the story of Navos. Remember, he wanted where you have Izebel and Achav, and Izevel wanted a wanted to kill. Well, actually, Achav wanted to kill Navos because he was jealous of his vineyard, and Izevel gave him the bright idea, right, to say that he was right to set him up and the chule. And anyways, so that over there, the Gemara says again, this is a Gemara from Shavuos that it's a that the names of God over there are also considered Kodesh. Kol Shlomo Hamor B'Shir Hashirim Kodesh. Finally, last one, or second to last one, when it says Shlomo, now what does Shlomo have to do with this? Because the word Shlomo actually is a heavenly name. For those people named Shlomo, you should be excited about this one, right? Anytime it says the word Shlomo in Shir Hashirim, that's actually referring to God. Wow, I bet you didn't know that, right? Because it says Shir Shalom Shalom. Okay, so the word Shlomo is actually a reference to God's name. They're all Kodesh, okay, says the Rambam. V'harehu kisha'ar ha'kinuyin. And it's almost like the rest of the nicknames of God. Remember before we said that if that right, God has nicknames and those also have the same kedusha. So every time it says the word Shlomo, you have to treat it like God's name. Chutz mizeh, except for the very, very end of Shir Hashirim, in one of the more enigmatic and mysterious psukim in all of Shir Hashirim, which has hundreds, literally, of interpretations, is the pasuk of Ha'elef L'cha Shlomo. Right? I'd love to give a class just on this pasuk because I was looking at it and it's fantastic. But basically, it the we'll have to maybe next week I'll discuss this pasuk. Kol malchia ha'amor b'Daniel chol chutz mizeh. All the times it says the word malchia, which is Aramaic for melech. When it comes to Daniel, they're all chutz mizeh, except for the pasuk that it's referred right. Again, this is because melech he's referring to Nebuchadnezzar. Except for this pasuk, Ant Malka Melech Malchaya, right? It sounds like one of the Zmiris, right? That we sing, Yaribon. So when he refers to Melech Malchaya, that's talking to God up above. V'harehu kisha'ar hakinuyin, and that has the kedusha of the rest of the names of God. So that's really the end of this chapter. And the next parak, we're going to talk about prophecy and who is fitting to be a prophet and what does it mean to be a prophet. So that's Perek Zion.